Wonderful. So welcome to Silver Tent TV and welcome to this interview with the remarkable Mary Lunnen. And Mary, I'm so excited and so honoured to be interviewing you today. And I just wanted to do a little introduction to set the scene, because Mary, you've been a member of the Silver Tent online community now for about 6.5 years. So I've known you for that time, mainly online. And right from the very beginning, even though you're a quiet person, I realized how much impact you wield. And the reason that I know that you wield such impact is because just maybe a couple of months after you joined the Silver Tent, and we just had at that point, I remember exactly, we had about 700 members in there then. So this is what, just over 6 years ago. And you put up one post on your personal Facebook profile recommending the Silver Tent, just one post. And over the next 2 to 3 days, over 500 more women joined the Silver Tent because of that one post. Our ranks of women over 50 nearly doubled. Now that, I mean, that was extraordinary. I've never experienced that before or since. And what's so interesting is that you, I mean, that's huge impact. And yet you wield that in the gentlest and quietest of manners. And how I find you, particularly now in these turbulent times, is like you're a fabulous antidote to like the chaos and the turbulence that's going around. And I was thinking just earlier, like, this is going to sound maybe a bit bonkers, but how I experience you is kind of the energy that you describe in the garden. That's part of the meditation in the book that we're going to explore, your latest book, Your Compass Rose Speaks, Rediscover Your Inner Wisdom. And so this energy that I get from you when I'm in the same space as you, online or offline, is like being in a very gorgeous, quiet, serene garden. And the words that actually sprung to mind is that it's like being under a very cool, gentle waterfall. And it's like everything starts to quieten down when I'm around you. So I'm not surprised you have the impact that you do. And having read your latest book now, it's in there, it's in every single page, is not just the way that you are like comfortable with life and in your own flow, and, you know, to use your own quote, that you've come back to yourself. But there is such a deep honoring of every person as an individual, with wherever they are at that point in their life and how they might approach the work that you offer. So it's such an honoring. I am not surprised that people come back over and over again to work with you, and not remotely surprised that you receive the reviews that you do. So welcome to the interview, Mary.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you for a beautiful introduction. And, you know, I'm smiling a little sort of wryly because it's taken me a long time to find my way home to myself and to that peace and that, you know, inner wisdom. And there's still a bit of the, you know, the old metaphor about the swan that looks so serene and is paddling madly underneath the surface every so often, particularly in regular daily life of the chop wood, carry water variety, which we all have to do because we still have to deal with the physical stuff of life. And yet that's when I most need to be able to find that place, that peace within for myself, and to help encourage other people to come back to that place too.
Beautiful. I didn't take myself through all the exercises when I was reading your book because I simply hadn't given myself the time to do that. But I felt the energy of each of the exercises. On some level, I have no doubt that I was going through the guided meditations. So let's just do a little introduction on your latest book, which is Your Compass Rose Speaks, Rediscover Your Inner Wisdom. And yes, thank you. Perfect. And my first question comes from the title, actually, or the tagline, I guess. So Your Compass Rose Speaks, Rediscover Your Inner Wisdom. And I'm really interested to know what prompted you to use the word rediscover.
Yes, long before I wrote the book, I developed my first little deck of cards, which are these little cards which I share in my daily Facebook group called Dare to Blossom into Joy, if anybody's interested. And I call them rediscovery cards, Dare to Blossom Rediscovery Cards. So that thought was already there, and the first deck of 50 I developed in 2012, and I was promised to do a second set of 50 early last year. And the principle is there's just a word and a color, and they're very simple. I think I'll draw one now for our time together, shall I? Because that's a
lovely idea.
Really powerful thing to do. So mine are all kept in a beautiful dish which has compass roses on it, which somebody told me about. And our word today together, and for everybody who's watching now or later, is story.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Are you going to ask me what I'm getting from that?
I will, as you know, within the book, and within all the work I do with these cards, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever it is this moment for you, and then next time you see it, it'll be something different. But yes, what is your first response?
And that's what I love is the fact that the flexibility around how you offer your work, and how story came to me just then is, wow, our whole life is about the stories that we tell ourselves, that we tell other people, what's happening to us, and we make our stories the most important thing, don't we? And yet often, if we look at our story differently, it becomes a completely different story. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting thing. I thought it meant that yesterday, and today I think it means this. And so yes, so that's how it came to me, was how I can fill my life with stories, and which ones do I choose to believe. Yes,
absolutely. And there's something, I'm going back to what you said just now about feeling the energy, even though you hadn't actually sat down and done all the exercises. That's again exactly what I want to create within my groups, what I hope to bring over in the book as well. Is that there isn't, with all my work, people may come and join me for an hour, or they come and join me for an hour a week for 6 weeks, and in a private group as well. With all of that, I offer prompts and suggestions and ideas for people to flow with. There's nothing you have to do. You don't have to complete anything. There are no assignments or challenges even, or tests or deadlines. There's nothing you have to do. And at the same time, if people settle into that peace and allowing of being able to do what they want to do, sometimes they do lots of things, of course, lots of journaling, lots of writing, maybe lots of sharing or not, but actually it does work away underneath the surface within an energy sort of level, at an energy level, without us needing to do anything. And my belief I've arrived at over the last number of years is that all of this thing, it doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to be hard or a struggle. We are simply coming home to ourselves, the place that we arrived at when we arrived in this world as babies, wherever we came from, whatever our beliefs are about that. We arrive from somewhere, we've forgotten our way home, we've refined it again. And for me, that's been my journey, and people would experience it differently and phrase it differently. And there's something about that. And what I offer is to be a companion along the way and provide a safe, quiet, sacred space where people can come together and share that journey for a little while, walk alongside each other for a short while along that journey. And we stay connected. I mean, as you said before, even then 6 years ago, I developed a big network, and I love doing that. That's what I've always done. It's what my mother always did, was just connect people and keep in touch and just weave all those threads together. And one of my strong beliefs is that we're all connected somewhere in the weave of the universe. Each of us little sparks of life that comes into light of life are connected. We may never meet. We may meet very briefly online or something. And then people often sort of, tug on the thread, is how I see it, tug on the thread and say, hello, I'm over here. Would you like to have a chat? And, sometimes it's a longer connection or a closer connection, and sometimes it isn't, or we come close for a while and drift off again and do other things. And that's just a beautiful flow and a way of experiencing the joys of connection and community, I believe.
I so feel your, I want to use the word strength, but it's not really what I mean. But, I've for so long associated the impactful facilitators, or the ones that I see, that are very visible, as having very big, outward flowing kind of charismatic energies. And I don't mean that you're not charismatic, but you're self-contained, aren't you? You're quiet and you sit back, you don't thrust your ideas forward. And yet I really, really get that, the power within you. And the fact that you call yourself a companion, it's like, what a profound companion you are on these journeys. And it's an energetic feeling, isn't it, that I get from you. And so I just want to go back to the idea that it's rediscover your inner wisdom. So you created the cards, the rediscovery cards, but what prompted it as a rediscovery as opposed to a discovery?
I don't know. It just came to me in that way. Tried to go back to that idea. And I think it's about 2010, 2011, I very first made them. I just used them in my workshops. In the days when we didn't have to say in-person workshops, when I used to, and I would, people would just, they started asking to buy the sets, so I started, creating them as a product to sell. I don't know why I called it rediscovery, but there was something must have come. It's probably something I read. I read very widely, obviously, of other people's work, other people's ways of doing this, and I believe that all spiritual teachers, or whatever you want to call people, doing exactly the same thing. Basically, it's all about love, and that is what we're coming home to. And when we're not able to focus on love, that's when we drop into fear, and that's a normal part of life. I go through that process daily, multiple times, I'm sure. I'm getting that fear mode, and I get worried about something, and that's just life, and that's just how it flows. But the more and more I can bring myself back to my heart, which is all about love, and connecting with other people's hearts, which is also all about love, there's something there about that. And that's what I believe, is that's what was always there with me and with us, that we've lost touch with, we've forgotten. That's why it's rediscovery. So it's nothing new. There's nothing new in what I'm doing. I'm just doing it in my particular way, with my particular experience in my travels through my life, which are different. Each of us have different and unique experiences, because we're unique people. And it's all connected with the same sort of flow of life, in however it's working through us all as we live it.
Yeah. Wow. I get that feeling, when you say about coming home to yourself, that sense of coming home also feels like coming back home, doesn't it? Like you've already been there, lost your way, come back. So that sense of rediscovering kind of matches with that idea of coming back home again. And I know that when you first got that sense of coming back home to yourself, you were very moved by that. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about that experience of first of all, how you knew you were lost, because that's not always easy to tell, I don't think, and how you felt and how you knew that you had come back home to yourself.
Yes, good question. I mean, just a little bit of background. As you know, I've written one of my previous book to this one was a short memoir called The Powerful Voice and the Quiet Ones, where there's a lot more about me in it. There's a little bit in this book, but certainly one of the pivotal experiences, as it is for most people, most of us have something that gives us a big push to make us reconsider life, whether it's bereavement, divorce, illness, children leaving home or whatever it is. But mine was a cancer diagnosis in 1994, which made me stop, literally, physically, and philosophically, if you like, and spiritually, and started me on the road of exploring all these different ways of helping myself. Because the first, the NHS is brilliant, still is brilliant, I'm glad to say, mostly at curing emergency or helping with emergencies, so giving you the immediate treatment, which probably saved my life in my case, and keeping us physically going. They're not anywhere near as good at the emotional and spiritual support. They're getting better, or were getting better before the latest difficulties. But what I found was, once I started helping myself and exploring that for myself, it was hugely empowering anyway, and that really brought me back to realizing that I could do these things, but also how far I had drifted away from my core self. One of the things I do describe in the book is going to a workshop, and I think it was around about 2010, something like that, because the book that the woman wrote afterwards, my piece was published in 2012, I think. I went to this workshop and we drew pictures of how we felt at that moment. And this person pointed out to me that the picture I'd drawn, I didn't have a face, I didn't have any features, I didn't have any eyes to see or a mouth to speak or ears to hear. And I was surrounded by all these various people who were depending on me and needing me and making demands on my time. There's a lot in it, it's all described there. But that was really where I realized how lost I was, and I had no idea where home was to come home to at that time. And it was quite a big, deep realization. I'm remembering, again, it's sort of that story really, I'm remembering it that way now. It may have been a different process of events that happened, whilst I was going through this journey. And that was sometime after my cancer diagnosis. There's a whole lot of things that I was reading, and even before that, actually, I was beginning to read and open up to these different things. But it's interesting because my mother was a very spiritual person, and she used to read widely and would talk to me about it a little bit. And at some stage in my life, probably late teenage years, where young people tend to think they know better than their parents, at a certain stage, which I think we probably all go through. It must be really irritating. I don't have my own children, so I haven't had to suffer that. But, I lost touch with that again as I went off for my own, developing young adult life, and probably got even more lost for a while. But I successfully navigated my way through that and came back to what I needed to explore. There's something about that. Being able to depend on yourself as well. Once I'd begun that journey and found that inner strength and rediscovered the wisdom that I've always had within, children, tiny children are extremely wise beings. The things that, again, I haven't got my own children, but I've encountered lots of young children. I've got some wonderful nieces and nephews, and great nieces and nephews in New Zealand. The things that children can say, and I think it's even more so now. I think the young ones today are more and more connected. I don't think they lose touch quite so much with where they've come from and that realization within. Because some of the young people I know are just extraordinary, the things that they'll say and the wisdom that they have within them. I don't think I had that when I was that age. Wow. Nobody's at fault for that. It's just the way the world was and how our parents were brought up and how they therefore brought us up and how the world changes. I know there are difficulties being a young person these days, which I didn't have to deal with. There's something about that. I think, the human race is, I have great hope for the human race, despite everything that might give us evidence for otherwise. I believe that, we are our own salvation. We are the people we need to be. We are the future that is coming, and we need to stay steadfast and do what we can do within our part of the world. And on the sort of theme of being a quiet but powerful person, I've never wanted to go out on a big stage and stand up in front of, I have done it actually occasionally in front of hundreds of people and have that huge impact. What I've wanted to do is to connect with lots of people, to just be who I am, where I am, and allow the ripples to spread. So even if people don't know where the ripples have come from, so some of those 500 women who joined the Silver Tent after my post probably didn't know me. They probably joined because of a friend who'd invited them. I don't know how the sort of route went. I don't mind if people don't know me or don't remember me. I like them to, of course, but in a human ego sense. But I don't mind, as long as it helps. What I do helps.
I'm so encouraged to hear you say that, and I'm really interested in the fact that you talk about the children and feel that they have a greater sense of connection, don't get lost quite so easily, and that's really encouraging too. So we were talking before we became live on Facebook Live. We were talking about the end result that we'd love this interview to achieve, and I did one of my intuitive tune-ins before getting onto Zoom with you, and I remember saying how I saw myself in a beautiful garden, the kind of garden that you describe in your meditations, and that how I felt inside that garden was very quiet in my mind, like absolutely nothing going on in my head, but so connected to the nature and the energy around me that I knew all I had to do was follow the prompts as they come up, and that life would flow really effortlessly. And so I thought, well, that would be a great achievement, that people get that sense of that's possible by reading your book and exploring the guidance in there. And I'm even cautious about calling it guidance because there's so much freedom in the framework that you create. And I asked you what kind of end result you'd love from the interview, and you said, well, that, actually exactly that. and I'd love to talk to you about that sense of being in that flow, and yes, a little bit about that, and the kind of people that come to you who aren't in that flow. It's like, what prompts people to come and do the work that you do? Yeah, I think there's two questions muddled up, but I'm sure there'll be a great answer.
Yeah. I mean, what you've started with is talking about the cards, which is what the earliest thing really I developed. Well, before that, I'd written a book called Dare to Blossom Coaching and Creativity, which in hindsight was almost a forerunner to the cards, because it had often had sort of one-word chapter titles, which were looking at something similar. But obviously it's all evolved, since I began running workshops. When I first began running workshops, I was so lacking in confidence, I wouldn't even read somebody else's sort of meditation words. I bought somebody's program and was using that with a recording. Then I began reading it, and now I've become confident at just speaking the words, which often follow the same form, but often they don't. And so, as well as the cards within the book and within the circles I run that is based on, there's always the same container for people to come into, whether it's a one-to-one coaching session or a group, which I love doing group work, because there's always that magic that happens in the gaps in between the structure. So I always start with the Compass Rose Speaks poem, which I might be able to include at some point during this conversation, as an opening and a closing. Again, that's the container I create to hold us all safe in our space together on a live Zoom call. And I draw some cards for each person, usually 3, depending on the size of the group. And everybody's given their opportunity to comment if they'd like to, with no expectation that they need to if they don't wish to share. It's absolutely fine. Then I take people on the guided visualization, which is developed really over the last 8 years. In 2015, I was made redundant from a job for the 3rd time. I decided to just focus on my own work. So it's all been ticking over in the background since 2003, so for 20 years now. But I was always working as well, and there's always that bit of tension then between trying to focus on employers' needs and on my own business needs. But in June 2013, I'll get this wrong now, 2015, that's 8 years ago. Excuse my thinking of years. How could I possibly be so long? Anyway, I wanted to do something really light after helping close up an office, being made redundant, saying goodbye to everyone, all that heavyweight stuff. I thought, I know, it's June, I'll do a midsummer magic carpet ride. And I developed a visualization, which has evolved since then, called a magic carpet ride guided visualization, which is what is in the book. And that's stuck ever since because people love it. And it gives you permission, usually makes people smile the first time they hear it, because it's that childlike joy of, oh, we love a magic carpet. Ooh. And people often don't see anything that I describe at all. They may see the garden as you did when you went to your tune-in. They may find the magic carpet, they may not. They may not see anything at all I describe. And that is one of the things for people to understand, is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't see any of the things I'm talking about. It's simply a container, just a place for you to feel safe. And one of the lessons I learned at one of my very early workshops, actually, that was in Glastonbury, and somebody came to that, and she came back from the visualization quite distressed because she couldn't find her magic carpet, and I thought she'd done it wrong, and or there was something terrible going on. But we just sort of sat with that and helped her explore it in the small group we were with. And what it turned out, of course, that was the message. She didn't feel able to give herself permission to play, even in the safe place, to play and find a magic carpet. And she told me later that prompted her to make some quite big changes in her life. And often, you know, that does happen with these visualizations. It's very light, very playful, and people sometimes come back with really practical tips for their business or their life, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's really moving because people often connect with somebody or a pet who's no longer with them in body, but they connect with them in spirit. And if that's the first time that's happened for them, or even if it isn't, it's really, really moving, of course. And sometimes people don't remember a thing. They just come back knowing they've had a really deep rest, or even literally gone to sleep. That happens sometimes. And that's all perfect. Whatever happens with people is absolutely perfect. And as the people that come back time and time again, as you said, Francesca, lots of people do, which I love, you know, every time, even within a short program of 6 weeks, you know, people's most common phrase is, "That was very different." And it's always different every time the magic carpet rides. It's always different. And that's part of the joy of sharing it in a group, because we hear these lovely stories, going back to story, we hear these stories that people come back with and share. And there's something about that witnessing for other people. There's no, you know, we're not commenting or trying to fix anybody, because there's nothing to fix. We're all perfect. We're all imperfectly human beings finding our way back home to ourselves. But hearing the stories, it often brings extra messages or gifts for each of us. This is something that spark another thought or help you remember something else that's happened. And it's just a joyful process anyway, just being present together and witnessing for each other.
It's so lovely. What really comes through for me as I hear you speak is that actually there's a great simplicity in what you do, and that people already have this wisdom, and you're creating the space where they can start to hear it and trust it. And I hadn't seen it like that before, but it just feels so simple. Like keep wanting to say it. It's like the rediscovery cards, one simple little card with one color and one word, and yet such impact. And we come back to that sense of impact again, the sense that people can go on this wonderful journey through the pages of your book, and through these simple guided visualizations get the most profound wisdom for themselves. And what an extraordinary gift that is. And so my next question in a way is, well, yes, I'd love to know, do you think that when people go through the book that they might then come and work with you like in a workshop or something, or do you see the book being all they require?
That's a really good question. I mean, what my aim as the book as itself, as a standalone thing, is to reach more people who wouldn't want to sign up to a course on Zoom or through Facebook, who wouldn't want to work in a group, perhaps, may not. But so far, most of the people I've had comments back from, of course, people who already know me, and they've often been on the programs, but they've found huge value. Even though they may have been on lots of my programs, they still found a huge additional value in working through the book, so which is wonderful. I've got somebody who's never been to anything with one particular person who wrote a beautiful review of my previous book just recently, because he bought them both at the same time. And I know he's a really thoughtful person. And I don't work with that many men, partly because I don't say it's just for women. It's partly my own energy probably, and the way I work tends to, you know, connect more with the way we all work as women, the way we like to be. And I have some wonderful male friends and connections and friends I've never met yet, but I'm connected with, who really understand this way of working. And as I've said, I do say within the book, I think it's more about the feminine sort of energy, the feminine power, to go back to the word power we were talking about. And the old paradigm of power puts people off, men and women, because they don't want to be connected with domination and control and fear. What they want to be connected with is the community, collaboration, and helping each other on the way through life, being a companion to each other. And there are lots of men who also desire that in the world for themselves and their families and their children. So connecting with people like that. And Nick Williams, who's written the foreword for me, he's another such wonderful man who, has really influenced me over the years, because he's been doing amazing work for a very long time. And having somebody like him being kind enough to write a foreword for me was a great honor.
And do you find, and one of the questions I was thinking of asking earlier was about the age range of the people that tend to come to you? Because I was thinking, oh, I wonder if it is the older, and I wanted to know whether you get many men on your courses. So you've just answered that. But do you find that it's mainly older women, or is it like all age ranges of, I guess, adults?
Yeah, it's all age ranges. When I was running workshops in Cornwall, I had one group locally who used to come back quite often. It's after I'd begun developing the Compass Rose process. And I remember looking around the room one day, and there was a young woman there who at the time was about 19, and there was somebody there who was in her 80s. And we're all in between, and we're all learning from each other. There was no question of who had more wisdom or not. We all learn from each other in different ways, and I love that. And I do have that's why my events I hold, and the online circles are open to anybody any age. Obviously, I love people from the Silver Tent coming along and joining me, and I've made some wonderful connections through our community. And I have a lot of people who come along who are not yet old enough, and they're dying to be old enough. I have one in particular, lovely woman who comes regularly, and she's still not 50 yet. I can't believe she isn't, actually. I've known her for a while. She's a very wise woman in her own right, as some of the younger ones are, as I said. So it's I just love having that whole range of ages in my groups if I can.
So just out of interest, so getting this sense of, I love the fact that it's like all these age ranges, but I was just thinking, well, I wonder if you have to feel lost first before you pick up a book like Your Compass Rose Speaks, or how would it work if, I mean, I don't know, like I'm almost wondering, could it be like the book that you read before you get lost, so that you're in tune with your wisdom much earlier on? So yes, well,
I'd hope so. I don't wish anybody to feel as lost as I felt back all those years ago. And I think probably the most likely sort of person to pick it up is somebody who's already read quite widely, looked at all these different ways of spiritual approaches and those things. What I really hope to achieve, and I think from what you're saying, what other people have said, I'm getting there, is I don't want it to be another what I'd call an ism or an ology, going back to a very old advertisement years ago, which you may remember. Don't like ologies. In other words, I don't say this is my way of doing it, it's the best way, you've got to follow this. I just say this is a suggestion of some things you could bring in, and you could bring in all your different parts and different ways of doing things within this. So there's no real sort of belief system entwined in it, though obviously there is, because I've brought myself from the way I function in the world. There's a belief in something bigger than ourselves. I think it's probably what most of us would share in common at some level, or a desire for it. I mean, I've got somebody I've been working with recently over quite a time period now, more than one person. I don't want to be too specific, obviously, but she's told me that she's found it a real lifeline to find her way back to the person she wants to be, and it's just something that's come to her at the right time, as these things often do, don't they? And it's just a way of reconnecting in a different way and finding a path home to yourself. And as I said before, sometimes people have worked with me for some time, and then I don't hear from them again, and they go off do other things, of course, and sometimes they come back again, sometimes they don't, and it's just a lovely sort of flow round and back and forth. I do find I like working with very small groups. I would like to get out to more people, have more people coming along. So obviously I am working in a life coaching practice, so there is some need for earning an income and helping me to carry on doing what I do. So I have to have my feet on the ground to a certain degree, as we all do, to make sure that happens. But what I love is being able to offer what I do. I offer lots of things that have no fees attached. They're either donations or they're very low fees. There's lots of things like the open groups and the book. Once you've bought the book, you've got that for life. There's things that I do that are very, very low in cost to people, and I want it to spread out to as many people as possible in a way that's sustainable, for all of us.
So what do you think is the main reason that we stop connecting or trusting our own wisdom?
Wow, gosh. Certainly in my childhood, some of that was schooling. Sadly, I'm hoping maybe I don't know if it has changed though. It was, when you're a child, when you're a small child, you trust yourself implicitly. You'll do some scribbles and rush up to mum or dad and show them with great pride the amazing artwork you've just produced. You've got no fear of being rejected or fear of being not good enough at that age. And that soon changes, and I became self-conscious and worried about what people thought of me. And in my case, I was bullied at school, as lots of people are, and that, obviously that knocks your confidence. And I think in the world of work as well, certainly, as I've spoken about before, being a quiet person, I felt I wasn't the way you're supposed to be in the world of work, because it seems to be set up for extroverts, and open plan offices and meetings where you had to speak up or you weren't heard, and these sorts of things. I've learned afterwards there's nothing wrong with me just because I think differently and respond differently. It's just I'm wired differently, and it's about the diversity of our brains. So whatever way our brains are wired differently, which we all are, and sometimes that has bigger effects in people's lives, enable them to cope with life, and sometimes you can muddle through as I did. But once I realized that this is actually just a different way of being, and in some ways is an advantage. And there's something about the loss to the working world and business if all the quiet people aren't heard, because we tend to be the ones who sit back quietly and evaluate and reflect on things and come up with something which sometimes isn't heard or seen because the moment's gone and the noisy people have already said their thing, which may be very similar to what I used to find. But I know I had a manager in my last job, and she said to me, "Well, where's Mary gone?" That was that was the most recent feeling very lost. I've had several cycles of coming home to myself and getting lost again. Actually, go back to your question. That particular one is a really very interesting learning process. That particular job, I did start off feeling very happy and confident. Some things happened to me within that environment which totally knocked my confidence. And this lovely woman who'd helped recruit me said, "Where's Mary gone?" And I cried at work because I felt, I didn't know where I'd gone, and that made me realize quite how far I'd lost my health again. And that was in a really, quite supportive environment, working with people, which isn't always the most supportive environment, sadly, in education or, healthcare and things like that. They are thinking about people, but their management of their own people isn't always the best. But yeah, so looking back, it was hard at the time, but it was another big coming home to myself moment. And then having been able to just focus on doing what I do now and help other people with that has made a big difference.
Beautiful, isn't it? And do you find that the majority of people that come to you are also quiet and more likely to be introverts, or do you often have extroverts as part of your workshops too?
Yes, I do actually. I have a big range of people, and sometimes that's a challenge when you're facilitating a group, as you know. If you've got a bigger group, sometimes they're large groups, and it's a question of managing the how everybody gets heard and seen and feels comfortable within it. And I have had a few challenging moments over the last few years in dealing with that, and had to practice, those skills of, helping everybody feel comfortable. So no, it's quite a big range of people, actually, I would say. I always remember some time ago, one of our early Silver Tent interviews, talking to Siobhan, and she was saying how we were opposite people. I was the introvert and she was the extrovert, but we had this really interesting conversation. There's no reason why we shouldn't do. We're not actually from different planets, we're from the same planet.
That's brilliant, isn't it? And if people want to buy your book, what's the easiest way? I know that we'll have, wish I could speak now. We'll have some links available, but just so they can hear, is it, yes, where are they most easily going to find your book?
Excuse me, it really depends on where they are in the world. If they'd like a signed copy with a dedication from me, they can buy it direct from me on the website. The most cost-effective way to buy it, certainly if you're outside the UK, is one of the big booksellers, wherever you normally buy your books, and so Amazon or wherever else. It's available in all the normal places, and often you'll get free shipping and everything through that, whereas I can't do that, as I'm just a one woman band and need to be able to cover the cost. But I have sent out quite a lot with dedications, and people do like that. I know I do the same. I like to buy books direct from the author, however much it costs, really, just to get that personal connection and feel that that's come from, I send it out from my hands to theirs with love, and it just feels really special then, that connection. But you can buy it anywhere, whichever's easiest. Unfortunately, postage from the UK to places like the USA now are just ridiculously expensive. So even so, people have chosen that, which is very, very wonderful and heartwarming for me.
And if those watching are interested in connecting with you directly, when is your next when is your next workshop?
Well,
and is that an online one?
Well, my next standalone circles, I call them, is tomorrow on 21st for the solstice at 11 a.m. So if anybody's watching this and is really keen to find out more and actually experience a magic carpet ride circle, it's 11 a.m. tomorrow. So you can find me on Facebook, and it will be in the Silver Tent if Silver Tent people are watching. And because I've got an unusual second name in London, I'm easy to find. If you could search for Mary Lunnen, then you'll find me. And then I have 2 monthly regular gatherings, one on a Monday evening and one on a Saturday morning. Okay, I've got this written down. The next Monday evening one is the 26th of June at 7:30 p.m. So that's more convenient for people across the Atlantic. I do get people coming at extremely early hours of the morning, which is always very flattering and amazing to me, because that's not my time of day. Then the next 6-week program, the Compass Rose program, starts in July, and there's some taster circles on 2 Wednesdays, the 15th and the 19th of July. Again, they're just open to people to come and experience it, because it's easy to talk about it, but it's really hard to describe what you will actually experience as an individual if you come along. And the book was attempting, as I said, to distill this into something which gives a taste of that, and I believe it's been successful in that from what people have told me, including you, Francesca. So I'm really delighted that that's the case.
I think it's a beautiful flow. The book, we haven't actually said much about the structure inside. That doesn't feel quite appropriate, really. But if you're watching this, the structure there's a great deal of simplicity, but there's a beautiful flow about it. It all makes sense, and I love the way that you structured it, Mary. I really do. I think it's a beautiful book, and I think it's got great impact, just like you.
Thank you. Well, one way to describe that before we finish off and say goodbye, if I just speak the meditation poem of the Compass Rose, which is where it all began, that actually describes the structure. So just to show people again before I do that, so this is the Compass Rose, if you can see it. So it's got peace in the center, purpose is north, potential east, power south, and progress is west. And then return to peace is the 6th part. When we do a 6-week circle, the 6th one is return to peace, which is the place in the center point where we've never left, and we're always connected wherever we go out in the world with those other petals, points of the Compass Rose. we're always connected if we can stand in that center point of peace. And that's been the big learning for me, is to be able to come back to my center point and feel grounded, take a deep breath, and then, you know, go out and do whatever I need to do in the world, whether that's literally or metaphorically. So the poem, which I use for myself all the time, I composed it up on the cliffs where I walk here in Cornwall all the time, and declaimed it to the seabirds to practice saying it. And I still do that sometimes. I certainly say it more quietly, perhaps. If I just do that now, this is how I open and close every one of the Zoom circles I host. So everybody's here able to close their eyes while they're listening, if it's possible. We'll come back to this across the recording. It takes a very short time. So just settle into your center point, into your heart, into your breath for just a moment. And you'll hear the voice of your inner wisdom as she speaks to you, your compass rose. Compass rose speaks. I am your compass rose. My center point is peace, grounding, balancing. Look up, look north to your guiding star, your purpose. From the east comes the rising sun, passion, potential. South is a source of nature's powers, the flowing rivers, the rising tides, the ever-changing ocean, the wind that shapes the land, the power that is arising in you. West is the land of the setting sun, progressing forward into the night, anticipating the promise of a new day. Return your attention to your center point, to peace, grounded, balanced. I am your compass rose.
That's so beautiful, Mary. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you being a participant in the relaunch of Silver Tent TV. And I really wish you the greatest of success with your new book. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a joy and an honor talking to you today, Francesca. Thank you.
Lots and lots of love. Now let me see if I can stop the Facebook Live effortlessly now. Hopefully. I'm hoping that that's completed, and lots of love, Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.